A very warm good morning to one and all. Here we start our session 6 for the International Webinar on Women and Development. The duty assigned to me is to deliver the welcome address for the session 6. First of all, I would like to welcome Ms. Munawwara Zubair, MPhil Scholar of the Department of Economics, University of Kerala, as the moderator of the session. Next, I extend my hearty welcome to the speakers of the session, Ms. Anaida and Jacob, IIT Palakkad, Dr. Anjana, Dr. Prasad, Professor Department of Economics, University of Kerala, Director, School of Social Sciences. I would also like to welcome Ms. Athira P. Nair, first MA Economics student of the department, for delivering the vote of thanks for this session. Now, I welcome each and everyone present here to this session 6 of International.
Good morning, one and all. We are on the second session of the second day international webinar on women and development. The webinar deals with a plethora of topics related to women, that is their women's vulnerability, their literacy rate, labor force participation, their role on screen, so on and so forth. We will be having two interesting presentations in this session. First presentation will be on the topic Women at Leisure, some evidence from India by Anaida and Jacob and Amrita Roy from IIT Palakkad. The study deals with leisure, an often neglected topic, and it explores the time budget of Indian women with special focus on their leisure time and evaluation of changes that occurred in time management. It also gives an account of the diversification of time devoted to leisure of women depending on some demographic factors. Now I invite Anaida and Jacob for presenting. You have 15 to 20 minutes for presentation. You can start the presentation.
Good morning to everyone. And today's topic of presentation is Women at Leisure, some evidence from India. So time is very crucial element, and the topic of time in economics is a subject which in recent days has become a popular topic of discussion in the academic circles. So time distribution patterns, analyzing it can give us an understanding of some unexplored areas which are often hidden from the national accounts. So time distribution patterns of households have significantly transformed over the years, mainly because of the longer lifespan, better education, health facilities, and more income generating opportunities. So among all the paid as well as unpaid activities performed by an individual, little focus is given to the leisure activities, which is an important aspect of assessing the quality of life. And even when we look into leisure, we see that it is divided into the lines of gender, creating a privileged and underprivileged class, where women is relegated to the status of underprivileged. Why is leisure essential? So leisure is basically essential on basis of two aspects. First one is the economic aspect as well as the health aspect. So here we can see that in economic aspect, when we look into leisure, it enhances the standard of living of the individuals, it improves their productivity, builds creativity. Then on the health aspect, when we look, it relieves the stress levels, improves one's health, and also inculcates a positive outlook within them. So few studies have looked into the allocation of time for leisure, and especially the women's time allocation of leisure within the Indian context. So to fill in the gaps in the existing literature, this present study focuses on this aspect as such. Now we also focus on to the leisure time allocation across age level, education level, and income levels of the women. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. So we have, when we look into the review of literature, or when we review the literature, we can see that there are n number of definitions given for defining the leisure. And broadly, this definitions can be divided into three categories: on the as an activity, as a portion of time, also as an experience. So these definitions are given here, where it is defined as an experience of freedom, and also a portion of time which is not, in which a person is not obliged to work, and also as an activity where an individual indulges in his free will. And there are different papers which deal with the association of age as well as leisure, education and leisure, and also income and leisure. So in all these studies, we can see that they are showing mixed results. In some studies, it shows that having more income, having more education as well as age tend to increase the leisure time allocation of women. But in some other cases, it is showing vice versa. So literature review is also showing a mixed result, and the studies concerning Indian context is very rare in this context. So the present study follows the data from the time use survey, and time use surveys are basically the surveys conducted to get the time details of the population and also the activities in which they are engaged in. And different objectives are kept by different countries. And in India, we generally take into analysis to keep it mainly to analyze the status of poverty and human development. And different countries have different specific objectives. And also there are differences in methods of collecting time use data. And these two are the major methods. And the present definition, present study uses the definition of leisure. This definition, that is defined as the residual free time waiting after all the paid, unpaid, as well as physiological needs of an individual. So this is the gist of the time use survey so far conducted in India. So the latest survey was conducted in 2019, and that was conducted by NSSO, which covers all the states in India. So in the present study, we are focusing on the published reports of 1998, 99, and also the time use survey of 2019. And we are looking onto the general tendencies of free time, and this free time is denoted in code 8 in both the surveys. And this further stratification of activities in code 8 is given here. We have 7 activities here. So attending, visiting cultural entertainment, sports events, cultural participation, sports participation, mass media usage, activities related to reflecting, resting, relaxing, traveling time, other activities related to cultural leisure, etc. So to make the comparison easier, we are using the following indicator: time spent per person on a day for activity, and which is calculated using this formula. And then the 1999 survey, time use survey, has calculated weekly hours. So, and NSSO time use survey collected data on daily minutes. So to make the comparison possible, we converted it using this formula. And to analyze the share of the leisure in the total time, we have used the following formula here. Now, going on to the major results from NSSO. So to look into the association between age and leisure time in India, we have a figure here which talks about the daily minutes spent by women in different age groups and leisure activities. So here, as we can see, we have divided the entire category of women into 3 generations of potentially productive workers within household: girls of 6 to 14 years, and young women of 15 to 59, and also the senior women of about 60 years of age. And it is clearly evident from the figure that the urban as well as the rural women senior women tend to spend more time for their leisure, and which is followed by the category of young girls, which who spend around 175 minutes per day for their leisure activities. And rural-urban differences are minimal in their case, in the case of young girls, whereas rural-urban differences are maximum, or it is more evident in the case of senior women. And to understand this phenomenon in detail, we need to look into the different activities in which they engage as a part of leisure. So here we can see that the daily leisure time activities of women in minutes, and the following are the different activity codes which we have discussed in the previous slide, and different colors are given here. So we can see that among the girls of the age 6 to 14, they spent their maximum time within code 82 and 83, which stands for hobbies, games, as well as sports participation respectively. And as the age increases, you can see that code 84 and 85 is increasing, which means that they spend most of their time for mass media as well as reflecting and resting, relaxing. So this is one important finding. And another important thing is that the leisure time structuring of women. If we consider the total leisure time as 100%, people spend different proportions of time for different activities. And here we can see that as age increases, the mass media as well as the resting, reflective, relaxing time is increasing across the age level. So this finding is from the NSSO 2019. And again, this similar trends can be seen in a short survey that was conducted by a German database company, Statista, where they tried to collect the time details of the activities in which women wish to engage if they had adequate time. So they found that as age progressed, women wanted to engage more in passive leisure activities. So the same trend can be seen here also, because initially they spent more time for sports activities and games as well as other activities, whereas as age increases, we can see that they are moving on to passive leisure activities. So this was also similar trend can also be seen in the same case which I told about the short survey which was conducted in German database company Statista. So why is it so? So why the older women are spending more time on mass media, and why they are spending in passive leisure activities? This can be understood only when we analyze the cultural and social background of the old women. So the social as well as the cultural background of the old women of today, they date back to 1960s as well as 70s, where they lived in joint families, and also they had minimal opportunities to get educated as well as socialize themselves. So this tendency continued in their later years of lives, as we see here. And also, women generally they face several shifts in their lifetime. That means they face widowhood, marriage, motherhood, etc. So all these shifts has a direct impact on the leisure time allocation of the women. And also, we know that women are the primary, or they are the ultimate bearers of the family responsibilities, and they are often called as the prisoners of love and care, because they have to care about their family members, their children, etc. So all of this will alter the leisure time allocations of the women, which is evident here. Now, if we look across the years, that is, if we look into the time use surveys that was conducted in 1999 and 2019, if we make a comparison, we can see that the overall leisure time has increased marginally, and the leisure time of the senior women has increased much more. So this is mainly because of the increase in the leisure consciousness among the women. Mainly because we know that during these time period, we see that there is emergence of the nuclear families. Also, more resources are there at the disposal of the millennials. So all this has improved the leisure consciousness among the women. So which has possibly impacted their leisure time allocations. Now, if we look into the relationship between education and leisure time in India, so it is a popular belief that as education increases, we see a more increase in the leisure time. But our Indian time use survey is placing a different picture here. We can see that the illiterate as well as the below primary level people tend to spend, women tend to spend more time for leisure as against all other education levels. So this can be attributed to the change in the nature of the jobs that has happened due to the economic restructuring in 1990s, because jobs has become more complex and more sophisticated and more skill oriented. So the more educated women tend to spend more time for skill acquisition, and their leisure time allocation has declined, and also their jobs has become more competitive, which added to their stress levels. Now, if we look into the activity-wise analysis of the different leisure activities in which women engage, we can see that the illiterate as well as the below primary level educated people spend most of their time for sports activities, whereas as education increases, this shifts to mass media usages. So here again we have to take into consideration that as education level increases, people need to have more information at their hand. So this thirst for information will help them to have more information related devices like mobile phones, television, which can also be used as a mode of leisure. So that can be a possible reason of this particular tendency. Here, again, we are making an analysis between two time use surveys, 1999 and 2019. Again, we can see that the illiterate as well as the below primary level people, women, have increased their leisure time across the years as against all other categories. And this can be considered as a result of the increased leisure consciousness among the illiterate as well as below primary level women. Why? Because an illiterate woman in 1999, it is not possible for her to think about having more leisure time, because it is not easy for her to afford some of the leisure modes like television, mobile phone, etc. But now it is easy for all the categories of people, and also this information is everywhere. All of them are aware about the positive effects of having more leisure time. Now, if we consider the association between income and leisure time in India, we know that theoretical model of individual labor supply explains the work leisure decision of an individual. And leisure is considered to be a normal good because as wage increases, leisure also increases. But Indian time use survey is showing a paradoxical trend in this front, because we can see that the middle income, we can see a paradoxical V-shaped or U-shaped relationship here, because the middle income women, they are spending the less time for leisure, as well as the extreme poorer as well as the extreme richer sections are showing relatively higher amounts of leisure. Why is it so? Does this mean that the extreme poorer sections are foregoing their earnings so as to get more leisure time? No, this is mainly because of a peculiar characteristic of India. Mainly, the poorer sections tend to live in communities, because we can see that in different cities, the poorer sections tend to live in slums. So women over there, they have more. They're more they spend most of their time for maybe chit chatting or knitting or building their hobbies. So this can be possibly a reason why we have a paradoxical trend here in the case of India. Now, if we compare the leisure time spent by men and women among the employed sections, so we can see that the casual labor women are the most time squeezed in this front. In they can spend only 105 minutes per day, and also we have to understand that the across all the past slides we have seen, the rural urban differences are very much evident. And why is it so? Because in rural areas we know that the India being an agrarian nation. Yes.
You are having 5 more minutes.
Okay. So in rural areas, we know that in India, basically being an agrarian nation, we are engaged in farm-related activities, which belongs to unorganized sector. So the clear-cut division of work as well as leisure is not possible over there. Whereas in urban areas, mainly they are focused on organized sector, where we have the clear-cut differences between our work-life balance is possible. So this can be a reason why urban level as well as rural level differences are evident. Now, if we look into the leisure of women in different states in India, we can see that Kerala being the most literate state, we can see that Kerala is having the least, the most leisure divide among men and women. So this green numbers shows that women outweighs men in terms of leisure time, and this red numbers show that men are having more leisure time than that of women. So here in Kerala as well as Goa, we can see that men are having more leisure time than that of men, which again proves that education is not a factor, or it is not a very significant factor in explaining the leisure time allocation. Now, if we look into the states or northeastern states, we can see that almost all the northeastern states are performing worst in this aspect. And this is mainly because even though they are performing in some better in some parameters like this literacy rate or some other parameters like enrollment rates, etc. So, but some studies have proved that the freedom for women to take decisions within the household is less within the northeastern region. So this is evident from this particular graph. Also, we can see that since they have less freedom, that is also being reflected in their leisure time. Now, if we look into the case of union territories, the Chandigarh is performing really well, and this is mainly because of the strong work culture over there. Because in a recent survey that was conducted in 2018 by Hindustan Times, we can see that they found that Chandigarh is considered to be the most happiest state for women, mainly because of the strong working culture and also the strong freedom that is available for the women. So in conclusion, we have analyzed the daily time spent by women per day according to their age, according to the educational qualification, and also according to their income. And also we have noted a significant variation in the leisure time enjoyed by women across states, men and women across states. So more importantly, leisure time at present is a part of consumer lifestyle. Technological progress along with social transformation has resulted in the development of leisure time industry in India. Over the years, Indian women are also increasingly becoming a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Anaida, for keeping up the time and for an enlightening presentation which shed light on some interesting conclusions, like the time distribution pattern of household have significantly transformed over the past years. And mass media related leisure enjoyed activities are becoming increasingly popular across all categories of women. And there has been a considerable increase in the time devoted to leisure in case of old age and illiterate women, and less leisure in middle class households and more in poor and rich enjoying. Thank you, Anaida, for a wonderful presentation. Now we are moving on to the next presentation titled Structural Violence on Women An Impediment to Women Empowerment and Economic Efficiency by Anjana B.S., Research Scholar, Department of Economics, Kerala University, and Dr. Prasad A.K., Professor of Department of Economics, University of Kerala. The study gives an interesting account of how structural violence, a form of violence wherein some social institutions like family may harm people by preventing them from meeting basic needs, which adversely affects the psychological, economical, physical, or sexual life of women. Also, it deals with gender disparity in time utilization pattern in Kerala. Now, I invite Anjana for the presentation. Anjana, you have 15 to 20 minutes for presentation. Please keep track on time. You can start the presentation.
Can you see my slide? Hello?
Yes, Anjana.
Yes.
Good morning to respected teachers and my dear friends. I am Anjana B.S. and I'm here to present a paper entitled Structural Violence Against Women. And this paper is jointly prepared by Dr. Prasad A.K. and me. We know that Kerala is a state that displays excellent social indicators comparable to developed countries. Women outperform their male counterparts in health, education, and many developmental indicators. But in case of work participation, the outcome is not favorable to women. The statistics depict a dismal picture of low female work participation rate. However, these figures do not mean that females are not working in the economy. Since market is believed to be the hub of productive work, some important work gets invisible or underestimated in the statistics. The activity classification of NSSO shows that very important works like mentioned in the codes 92 and 93 are excluded from the purview of work category, even though those works are significant. So a large part of missing labor is missing only from the official data, but is very much there in the labor force. The problem is they were unable to adequately capture it. And the main characteristics of these works are it is not directly paid or remunerated. These unpaid work are those activities which does not receive direct remuneration, like cooking, cleaning, caring, etc. And very often it is women who do this kind of works and bear most of the burden. These domestic tasks are perceived as their primary responsibility. It is associated to the social construction of gender and the dominance of patriarchal values. Even though unpaid work is significant and consumes a substantial amount of time, it remains hidden socially and in public policy. Since unpaid work is predominantly done by women, neglecting to include it underestimate women's contribution to the economy, which is a reflection of the patriarchal character and brings male bias into macroeconomics. The time utilization pattern of women and men in Kerala is collected through a time use survey, and the results tend to reinforce the conservative perception that women have been responsible for unpaid work, especially housework and caring. From the figure, we can see that time spent on paid activities is found to be highest for men. And with respect to unpaid activities, female respondents were engaged in enterprises or farms run by their spouse or father without any economic compensation. Also, female bear the greatest burden of housework and caring. Their unpaid activities ranges between 6 to 7 hours per day. On the whole, women spend about 5 times more in unpaid activities compared to men, even if it is not reflected in the official statistics. And this unequal distribution of unpaid activity is a clear form of structural violence. The concept structural violence was introduced by Johann Galton. It refers to a form of violence wherein some social institutions like family may harm people by preventing them from meeting basic needs,
which takes a toll on the psychological, economical, physical, or sexual life of women. And these women bearing largest burden of unpaid work is an evidence of structural violence, and it has a lot of dimensions. The results show that with respect to unpaid work, there is very unequal distribution between women and men. And what is important to note that is the predominance of women in this work is not the result of their free choice. The division of work between women and men is largely a social construct determined by patriarchal traditions and values. In fact, this highly unequal distribution is at the root of power relations and gender inequalities. Also, while looking at the definition of development in the Human Development Report 1999, it defines development as the process of expansion of choices in life through improved capabilities. These capabilities, such as education, nutrition, health, or family members, are developed not only by economic activities, but also by rendering attention in the form of cooking, serving, caring, which are unpaid. Thus, unpaid activities contribute not only to the current household consumption, but also to future well-being and to community well-being. By contributing their domestic work for free, they subsidizes the cost of care and salaries throughout the workforce and sustains family, support economy, and often fills the gap in public services and infrastructure. This work is that makes the society function and is therefore an important component of the economy, even though people are not recognizing the importance of this unpaid activity. But it does penalize women, because taking on the bulk of this kind of work often carries a penalty in terms of not being able to have a full-time job with a decent wage, or not being able to accumulate pension, not getting all of the benefits coming from formal sector employment. On the other hand, full-time unpaid workers do not enjoy any upward mobility or promotion or retirement or pension. So it is an unfair barrier to equal labor force participation rates and pay. And one of the biggest constraints on the supply side in labor market is their household responsibilities and corresponding lower mobility. The specter of patriarchy still looms over the state. Many respondents were not willing to trade domestic work for new employment opportunities while interviewing. While extra income would be welcome, the long list of chores at home would not allow her to take up a job. It is generally considered that welfare and happiness of a family depends upon the performance of domestic duties by women. So these structures should not be shaken or ignored. So women look for jobs in the informal sector where wages are low and benefits are meager. It helps them in balancing household duties as well. In Kerala, a lot of married women who has completed BTech degree are engaged in work from home with a relatively low salary. This implies that a significant part of the labor force in a given economy is locked into a low productivity kind of work. So the penalties are many, even though the benefits to society are huge. And also, by not fully engaging women, the economy is misallocating resources and fails to take advantage of their full potential in the marketplace. It also misses the complementarity between women and men in the workplace. The result is lower productivity and economic growth. So the gender gap in unpaid work is not just unfair, but also inefficient. Another important factor is that the unpaid daily task of women consume a substantial amount of time. It puts ceiling on the time that can be devoted for the personal care and development. The personal care and development activities are necessary for healthy life and individuals' well-being. It includes time taken for sleeping, eating, drinking, personal hygiene, and health. While looking at the data, we can see that while men get about 14 hours per day for personal enhancement, women get only 10 hours per day. Thus, women sacrifices time for their self-development for other household members, and the other members seems to free riding on unpaid labor provided by women. So, feminine time often exists in relation to the demand of time by others, because domestic activities are often prioritized above personal well-being by most of the women due to this social construction of gender and the patriarchal perception. This unequal distribution of unpaid work has also another implication. The single most crucial, men spend about double the time spent by women in social and cultural activities. Within these activities, women are engaged mainly in internal activities like watching television, and men in external activities. So the burden of unpaid work impacts women's ability to play an effective role outside home and enriching her social network, thus perpetuating the gender skew in social and cultural activities. Another important factor that constrains women in their personal development is lack of sleep. When I asked what she would do if she had more free time, one respondent said, "I would sleep, of course." The sleeping time is very less for women compared to men. And this high-low variation based on gender is also visible in the time taken to eat and drink. Women respondents explained the issue of too little time spent on men. One is that they often spend more time serving others than eating. Secondly, those having children below 6 years of age had to feed children along with themselves. And another major factor is many times women had no time to sit down for having meal and combined eating with other activities. They usually it is done by working women, because they have to finish all the unpaid activities before going to work. So they will be doing simultaneous activities and combining eating with other activities. Another major result of my study, as pointed out by Ms. Anaida, that there is no correlation between the time spent on unpaid activity and the educational status or the occupational status. In my study, it is found that the weekly time spent on unpaid activity by employed and unemployed range between 47 to 50 hours. There is no much difference between the time spent on these activities. So irrespective of occupational status, they have a major role to play in the household. So doing household activity is a must for women, and full-time or part-time employment in that job market does not reduce such burden significantly. Indeed, women continue to struggle with the second shift impact, in which they come home from a long day at work and take on the unpaid labor of housework and childcare. But the double burden on women is often not addressed. Men who have female partners working in the home have an unfair advantage over women in the workplace who have no free labor at home tending to their needs. This is a greater disparity in our society. And the combining paid work and unpaid work are more likely to suffer from time poverty. Unpaid work is also seen as household overhead type, HOT, which is defined as minimum number of hours a household needs to maintain and manage itself. In financially poor household, where more time is needed to process food, cook, clean, and so forth, the HOT is very high. Experiencing acute time pressure undermines women's human rights, since it undermines her ability to make choices. The immense burden of work is accompanied with little or no room for leisure and for acquiring human capital. therefore prevents women from pursuing further education, employment opportunities, rising their skill level, and tending to their own well-being. So in case of poorer groups, they suffer both from income and time poverty. But unfortunately, there is failure of women to recognize this continuing gender inequality they face due to the existing social division of labor. Even though women literacy standards are high in our state, the social transformation over a prolonged period was highly uneven, and patriarchy is apparent in generalized social commitment to women's domestic role. In most of the cases, women internalize and act as the carriers of age-old patriarchal values, thus imparting it to the next generation. So, concluding, patriarchy in contemporary Kerala is apparent in a generalized social commitment to women's domestic role. As Dalton states, when one husband beat his wife, there is clear case of personal violence. But when 1 million husbands keep 1 million wives in ignorance, there is structural violence. Participation in labor market and impressive levels of female education did not translate into reduction or sharing of unpaid work. The unequal division of unpaid work is the result of social construction of gender and patriarchal norms. The gender gap in unpaid work is not just unfair, but also inefficient. It was explained in the presentation that there was unfair barriers to equal labor force participation rate and pay, misallocation of resources, which obstruct the economic growth, ceiling of personal care and development, and acute time pressure, and the burden on their burden of these unpaid activities restrict their time for personal care and maintenance, like sleep, for time to spending for eating and drinking, and other social and cultural activities. Unpaid work should be incorporated in official statistics because it helps to design public policies and to undertake social actions to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid work. The perception of male as head of household remains strongly entrenched in society, with women themselves internalizing patriarchal values. Females fail to recognize the gender inequality they continue to face due to existing social division of labor. Women have to realize and acknowledge their own agency as agents of development. Lack of one of these elements, like education and enlightenment, will make it difficult to achieve the ends, empowerment and equality. So education and enlightenment is equally important for achieving the empowerment and equality. To quote Harriet Tubman, I freed thousands of slaves. I could have freed thousands more if they had known they were slaves. Similar is the case of several women in our society. For women to have a fair space in the society, we should create awareness in the society that the unpaid work is very important and women have a significant role in the society, and there is a need to share the unpaid work equally between all the family members of the household. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anjana, for coming up with a serious disposition and arriving at some thought-provoking conclusions, like females appearing to be a net drain on the economy rather than serving as an important contribution, failure on part of women to recognize gender inequality due to existing social division of labor, an unpaid daily task consumes substantial amount of time and it's unfairly distributed among women. Thank you, Anjana. Now the floor is open for questions, discussions, and reflections. You can either unmute your mic to raise questions or type in the chat box. I have a question. Is there any country calculating their national income on the basis of time use? Anybody can answer.
Okay, so there are actually there are no countries which consider time based estimates for calculating their income or something, but some countries like UK and US have a huge amount of information and they have a huge amount of time series information with regard to this, that they have started to collect like data from around 1980s or something. So they have huge amount of information, and this several institutes have started calculating time poverty on the basis of these estimates of different countries. And unfortunately, India started only very recently, but we are able to calculate time poverty rates using this data if we are using it effectively. But nobody has officially started to incorporate all these things, but researches are going on about calculating time poverty on the basis of these time estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Um, uh, this is Jasmine. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Ma'am, so for the time use survey, I mean, very, very interesting study on women of Kerala. But I just wanted to check, have you also looked at the caste dimension of gender disparity? Because that intersection would be would bring out even starker realities for different caste divisions amongst women, and women getting different wages for the same amount of work that they do, and the kind of paid and unpaid work that they engage in. So this is the question to the researcher who's working on the time use survey. Ma'am, would you like to elaborate on that?
Thank you, ma'am, for the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have looked at the time utilization pattern of women and men with respect to the caste, but there is not much difference between the time spent by women with respect to caste, but with respect to men, there is a difference between the time spent. For example, those belonging to the general category men, they are spending very less time, very merely maybe 4 to 5 hours, which range between 4 to 5 hours per week for unpaid activities. And these activities, there is hierarchy in the kind of activities they are engaging. The male members are mainly spending time on dropping their children, or to take their parents to the hospital. Like these kinds of activities, they are mainly engaged in, rather than the cleaning or cooking kind of activities. But in SC/ST communities, men are more engaged in activities like cooking, or helping their children to take bath, these type of activities. So with respect to female members, there is no much difference, but with respect to male members, there is difference in the participation for time.
Thank you so much, Anjana. That answers my question. Thanks a ton.
And I have a question to Anaida, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, in the previous 1990s time use survey published by the government, they used the SNA, the methodology. Yes, SNA, extended SNA, non-SNA, that classification. But in the new report, they used the definition. There is a difference in the definition. What do you say about that?
But I have looked only onto the activity classification, where code 8 relates to the leisure.
So almost all the activities in the coded between 1999 and 2018 is similar, and I have taken only those activities which were there in 2019 survey, and when we made the comparison. So in that way, I made the comparison actually. So so only those activities which were listed in 2019 were taken from 1999 survey.
Since there is no question, we can actually conclude the session, because the session started a bit earlier. So I feel that there is nothing wrong in concluding the session a bit early. So then we can actually come back at 1:30 in that sense. So thank you.
Okay. Now it's time to formally wind up the session. I invite Athira P. Nair for the formal vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for session 6 of International Webinar on Women and Development. We have been fortunate to have today's paper presenters grace our session, Anaida and Jacob, Amrita Roy, IIT Palakkad, for their presentation on the topic Women and Leisure, some evidence from India, and Anjana PS, Dr. Prasad AK, University of Kerala, for their presentation on this topic, Structural Violence on Women, and Impediment to Women Empowerment and Economic Efficiency. Next, I am thankful for Munawwara Zubair, MPhil scholar, for being the moderator of the session, and Chandana VS for Economics, who delivered the welcome speech. Last, I extend my gratitude to everyone who invests their time for being a part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you all for being with us, and we will break the session now, and we will exactly come back at 1:30. Please have your lunch and all. So then come back and join us by exactly 1:30. Thank you all.